So, why are you your own worst enemy? For most of my adult life, I've been trying to understand why it is that people are their own worst enemy, because that's weird, right? Now, there's lots of research out there explaining why that's true and also what to do about it. But there's one aspect of why we are our own worst enemy that nobody seems to be talking about. And yet this one thing has the power to keep us locked into creating the same predictable results over and over again. Now, don't get me wrong. Predictable results are great when they're the ones you want. But if they're not the ones you want, then that becomes a problem. And when you examine some of the results you're creating in your life and in the world, then the need for unpredictable results becomes clear. For example, did you know that right now there are 1 billion people on the planet who don't have access to enough food or safe drinking water? And yet, our population continues to grow by more than 80 million people every year. Did you know that there are huge dead patches in our ocean that no longer support life? And yet we dump more than 8 million tons of plastic into our oceans every year. Did you know that we produce 7.1 billion pounds of garbage every single day? And that before I finish speaking to you today, 108 kids are going to die of poverty-related causes. Mostly they'll starve to death. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear those statistics, I almost want to tune out because they're so painful to really take in, and I feel helpless. And I wonder, is that feeling of helplessness preventing us from taking the actions necessary to affect change? So what happens when we feel helpless? In 1967, there was a study done where scientists harnessed dogs and shocked them to understand what happens when an animal feels helpless. Now, the first group of dogs could end the shocks by pressing a lever. The other group of dogs, however, couldn't do anything to end the shocks. Next, they took those dogs and they put them in an open box with an electrified floor. Now, the first group of dogs quickly learned that by jumping out of the box, the shocks ended. But the second group of dogs simply laid down and whimpered until the painful shocks ended. You see, they had learned that the shocks were inescapable. And even though the circumstances had changed where that was no longer true, their knowing had not. It was as if they had constructed an invisible cage that kept them stuck. And those dogs would not jump out of the box until it was proved to them it was possible. Researchers physically had to take their legs and move them out of the box at least twice before the dogs would do it on their own. And I wonder, are we like the dogs? Do we learn that we cannot affect change in one circumstance and transfer that knowing to another circumstance where that's no longer true? Well, to see if this is true, let's examine how our brain works. So, first, our brains are designed to keep us safe, and so they help us avoid pain, and they predict the worst-case scenario for us. That way, hopefully we can understand it and avoid it. Also, our brains react to all change as a potential threat, even if it's good change. So if your husband or boyfriend suddenly start bringing you flowers, even though he'd never done that before, your first thought isn't going to be, great, upgraded husband. It's going to be, uh-oh, what has he done? Just automatic. And recent science has determined that the vast majority of what we do and say every single day is controlled by our subconscious, requires no conscious participation on your part whatsoever. So the stimulus comes in, your subconscious brain suggests a course of action. Stimulus comes in, course of action. Ball thrown at head, you duck. Wife yells at you, you yell back. Automatic. No conscious participation at all. But your brain, your subconscious brain, can only access solutions based on what you know, based on logic, because it's really good at predicting outcomes. Well, this has happened in the past, so this will probably happen in the future. And our subconscious predicts all kinds of things, how our relationships will go, how work is going to go, how our lives are going to go. It uses logic to do that. So, I've devised an experiment to see if you can catch your subconscious brain in action. Are you with me? Okay, close your eyes. I'm going to predict your future 5 years from now. You wake up. As soon as you open your eyes, you spring out of bed filled with joy and excited to start your day. After you get out of the shower, you look in the mirror, and you are so thrilled at the way you look, your ideal weight, your muscles are strong and toned, and your body is pain-free. You're super excited about your job, where you work with people you admire, doing work that you think is important, and earning all the money you want. So on the bus to work, well, of course you take transit now because it's so convenient and reliable. You read the newspaper, and the headlines are great. All nations sign off on plan to create sustainable population for planet. 50% of plastic removed from oceans, dead zone shrinking. Zero waste initiative sweeping the globe, now producing half the amount of garbage. Beef consumption down 40%. New cropland used to feed hungry children worldwide. Okay, open your eyes. It's a good future, right? But is it the one that you would predict? Would you bet your house that that future is going to happen? No? Why not? Because it just isn't logical. The world has never been able to produce those kind of results before. Why would it now? Just like it isn't logical that you would start suddenly being successful in an area of your life where you've always struggled, or that you would easily shed those unwanted pounds even though you've tried to do it for years, or that you would stop being afraid or lazy or irresponsible, because that's just who you are, right? And yet, people do that all the time. Are they special people? Do they have some secret formula that only they have access to? Well, if you ask them, they would say no. But maybe they're just not waiting for someone to prove it's possible before they try and make a change. Maybe they've learned how to unlock their cage. Because let's face it, logic kind of sucks. I mean, logic seems to keep us locked into this predictable pattern of results that just don't work. Locked us into a world of marginal improvement and realistic expectations. Except I don't think that logic is really the issue. I don't think it's the problem at all. I think that logic is actually a smokescreen behind which something much more sinister and insidious hides. See, I think the real problem is resignation. Not like I quit resignation, but resignation is the unresisting acceptance of a probable future. When you're no longer resisting a probable future, you're resigned. And worse than that, we don't think we're resigned. You see, our conscious brains love to think that anything is possible, but our subconscious, who controls the vast majority of what we do, doesn't think that because it's based on logic. So, logic is not the problem. It's resignation. And it happens to everybody. And here's how I think it happens. So at some point in our lives, we're going to struggle to produce the results that we want. Let's say I wanted to ask a girl on a date. And the first time I do it, I get a little nervous, and I kind of mumble my name, and I ask her to eat lunch on me instead of with me, and she laughs. And all her friends laugh. And I slink away, horribly embarrassed, and I feel terrible. And I say, maybe I'm not good at this asking people out thing. And my brain says, I don't think you're very good at this asking people out thing. But I don't want to be alone. And so I say, okay, I'm going to do it again. And then your brain goes, whoa! You sure that's a good idea? Starts predicting the worst case scenario for you to keep you safe. Are you sure that's a good idea? Remember how you bumbled your name and you asked her to eat lunch on you? That's a terrible idea. You're horribly embarrassed and you go, no, I'm going to do it. But in the meantime, you're over there, you got the worst case scenario broadcast in your head and you totally blow it again. And so then you slink away horribly embarrassed and you think, okay, I am not good at asking people out. And in that moment, you've made a bit of a decision about yourself. You've constructed that cage. And your brain agrees, you're not good at asking people out. But now you're kind of stuck. Now your probable future has become more certain. But now, our brains, in order to make us safe and to avoid pain, says, don't think about that. Because even thinking about asking someone out becomes painful, so it just tucks it away. So no, don't think about that. And now, you've lost the key to your cage. You're not even thinking about it anymore. And when you've stopped thinking about taking new actions to overcome a probable future, you are stuck. The question is not, am I resigned? The question is, where am I resigned? Have you ever noticed that it's a little easier to see resignation in someone else? Like, oh, I can see you, they're really stuck. So what if we helped each other see where we're resigned and helped us, instead of creating the same predictable results, created unpredictable results? That'd be good, right? Except I got to warn you, our brains don't like unpredictable results. Because they'll be yelling at you, are you crazy? Unpredictable results, then anything can happen. And it'll start predicting the worst case scenario for you. But what it won't automatically do is talk about the other side of anything can happen. The good side. That is a conscious act. So how do we defeat resignation? It's simple. Maybe so simple that you might even discount it. But it's not easy. Because the first thing you need to do is recognize and ignore the automatic response. The stuff you already know. That's just going to produce the same results that you produced in the past. How you defeat resignation is through a conscious act of creation. Now, you'll know you're doing it right because it won't be easy. It won't be automatic. It takes looking into the void and trying to create something new, not just going to show up. You know how like when you click on the computer and the little wheel is spinning, so the computer's thinking, and then something great happens? It's like that. You're looking into the void, and then poof, a new idea. What if I took a few deep breaths before I asked someone out? What if I created a script? Now, I'm not saying that all your new ideas will work out. But what I'm saying is that when you create that one idea, that is your key to your cage. It is your key to creating an unpredictable result. It makes your certain future no longer certain. Because in the world of anything could happen lives our improbable future. You see, in our improbable future, your relationships that are difficult and toxic, they become easy and fulfilling. In your improbable future, you easily overcome your fears to create the life you really want. in our improbable future, we all work together to create a world that works. And that's the future that our brains automatically resist when we think about unpredictable results. Now, never doubt that a conscious act of creation has the chance to profoundly impact a life and the world. A quick story. I knew this 9-year-old little boy who was happy, if slightly hyperactive, who came home from school one day to find that his father had committed suicide. Of course, that created some predictable results in that little boy's life. Became sad, emotionally upset, got into a lot of fights and struggled in school. And as he grew up, he, experimented with substances and fell in with the bad crowd. And then when that young man's mother passed away of lung cancer when he was only 17, more predictable results. He got depressed, lost, he felt alone, and he became suicidal. And he decided that he was going to take his rent money and buy survival gear. And then he was going to hitchhike into the mountains and let God decide whether he should live or die. Now, as luck would have it, the clerk who sold him the survival gear was an acquaintance from high school. And 2 days before this epic battle of man versus nature, he came to his house and said, "Hey, instead of doing that, why don't you come live with me and my parents?" That one new idea changed the course of that young man's life. That conscious act of creation defeated his resignation about this probable future of misery. How do I know? Because that young man was me. And I don't know where I'd be if that clerk, Steve, hadn't created a new possible future for me. If we want to affect change in our lives and in the world, step one is to defeat resignation. And I believe that if we can do that in our own lives, in the lives of our friends and family, in the little things, then maybe we can defeat the resignation about the big things. And then together, we can create a future that defies our logical conclusions. One that right now is unpredictable. Thank you. Thanks.